I will tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of a lot more spending plans. I'm afraid of an agenda that really is going to put the squeeze on middle-class Iowans. I mean, the fact is, Chet Culver and the legislative Democrats raised spending in the state by $1 billion. And they can talk about balancing the budget and putting money in the reserves and a lot of other things like that. The fact is, they have led the state on the biggest spending spree in our history. I mean, Governor Culver did 1 year what Terry Branstad and Tom Vilsack couldn't do in 12, and that's raise spending by $1 billion. So I'm concerned about the way the governor's going to put together this budget. I'm concerned that I'm going to hear too much about new spending programs and not enough about protecting Iowans' pocketbooks. I mean, we all know we're looking at a $500 million property tax increase in the next 5 years. And candidate Chet Culver talked about doing something on property taxes. Governor Culver proposed doing something on property taxes, and in the end, he did nothing but sign a lot of small property tax increases. We believe that the time for that kind of behavior and that kind of lack of action is over. We need to see something done. I'm looking forward to seeing some concrete proposals out of Governor Culver on that, and if he doesn't have anything, I'll be sorely disappointed because it will be an opportunity missed. He can't make the problem go away by wishing or by waiting for another year. The problem only gets worse. And so I'll be disappointed if I don't see something to provide middle-class Iowans some sort of property tax relief.
Senator Wieck, same question.
Based on comments that Senator Gronstal made earlier, I think that it's pretty clear to me that the cash reserve funds, the savings accounts, the rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, is going to get hit. And we're at a time when revenues are really in good shape in this state, and we ought to be doing what prudent people do, and that is that we ought to be preparing for the times when things aren't good. And raiding the now full rainy day funds is not the answer, in my opinion. We should be fiscally more conservative. We ought to be thinking about down the road. We can look back within the last decade of the downward trend in the economy in the state of Iowa and how the money in the rainy day funds, cash reserve accounts, etc., were needed to make the budget work and to provide Iowans with service. Well, here we are at a time when times are good and revenues are up, and we can't control our spending, and I'm talking about the majority party when we talk about that. We can't control our spending, and as a result of that, we're going to spend down the rainy day fund accounts when we ought to be maybe filling them or overfilling them if we were being very, very responsible with our spending.
You guys want to have a seat? We can start all over here. You're going to stand in the door. Okay, great. We've got chairs.
Before I forget to ask, Representative Rants.
Sure.
This bill of raising the minimum age for dropouts from 16 to 18, is that going to be bipartisan? And can you think of anyone who'd be opposed to such a thing?
I honestly haven't. I'm not familiar with a particular piece of legislation you're talking about. Can you tell me who the co-sponsors are?
I do not know.
Okay.
Our sister station's doing a piece on it, and I promised to ask. So.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I know there are members of both caucuses that have talked about looking at raising that sort of minimum age that everybody has to stay in school. To be honest, where our focus is on trying to raise the standards for those children that are in school. The fact is, last year, this General Assembly and Governor Culver reduced education standards that were put in place in a bipartisan agreement between Republicans and Governor Vilsack. It's the first time ever we've actually reduced standards. Now, we ought to be looking at raising those standards. And I know that Judy Jeffries and Department of Education have a lot of reasons why they don't want it, why they say we don't need to, and they talk about costs and they throw out, proficiency levels. Well, they think that 41st is proficient. You rank 41st and consider that good enough. We don't believe that's the case. We think that we ought to be looking for sort of a gold standard, be it the ACT, be it the NAEP. We ought to be having the highest standards and the kind of curriculum for our kids, whether it be in a small rural school district or a large urban one, that all those kids have access to the same kind of course offerings that they need to be successful in this global economy. And that means more math and that means more science. It doesn't do any good to have the kids in school by raising them age if we don't do something about also raising the standards and making sure they have the right curriculum.
Back to the rainy day fund. So where do you get this idea that they're
They did say that, but Senator Grunstall also has said that if Wieck, and I'm not sure that I can quote this exactly, but he has in essence said that during good times, if we can't keep our promises, when the rainy day funds are full, how can we ever keep our promises? And I'm simply saying my interpretation of that would be that I think we can expect them to visit the money store room in the back room. I really believe that.
I mean, do you think that's fair when they say they won't, but they haven't done it yet?
I think it's an indicator of what their intent is. And do I think it's fair? I don't think it's fair that they approach spending in the state of Iowa in that manner. As again, I said a little bit ago, maybe a little bit before you came in, we're in a pretty good time in Iowa right now, but there's a lot of indicators that the economy could be turning downward, and so we should not be spending the money that we have set aside for bad times, like we all know we saw in the last decade or so. We needed the money that was in the rainy day fund back then to balance the budget, and I would hope that the Democrats, if that's a fair way to put it, I would hope the Democrats aren't proposing to raise the rainy day fund. I mean, we could see a downward trend in the economy, and we could need that resource down the road. And if we do that during good times, we will have nothing to go to when times are a little tougher.
Do you think of their contention that they're healthier, reserve funds are healthier than they ever have been? Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, you know why they're healthier? You know why the reserve funds are healthier? A, by law, they have to be. They have to keep filling them up. B, when Republicans left as the majority party, we left them a surplus. Here's what the Democrats are going to do. Right? They're going to spend money in the wrong fiscal year. I know that's really interesting stuff for your readership. They spent money in the wrong fiscal year, but that's how they got it done last year. The Democrats continually fund things in the wrong budget year. Chet Culver's #1 priority last year was the Power Fund. It wasn't funded in the year in which the legislature was working on the budget. We took money out of the previous fiscal year. The Democrats are counting on being able to play the same trick again because money came in above expectations to push that money forward. Problem is, you can't keep doing that and make your budget balance. Iowa families can't reach back or say, well, I'm counting on getting this money from another year and use that to pay off my MasterCard or pay for my gas or pay for my groceries. Only in state government can you do it. Let's face it, the Democrats don't have a lot of things positive to talk about their budget. They're not out trumpeting the fact that they raised spending by $1 billion instead of spending record. Instead, they point to the fact and say, well, the reserve fund is full. Well, of course the reserve fund is full. It's supposed to be full. It's required to be full by law. And it's full because the last time Republicans passed a budget, we filled it up for them. We filled it up for them. So they didn't screw it up, and they want to have accolades for that. You know, if that's the best they can do, we've got a long ways to go.
What about the Trump Blues Florida governor's idea for raising the bottle bill, using penny, that sort of thing? Is that something that's a part of it, or
Look, it's a tax increase, okay? Let's be honest about it. What Governor Culver proposed was a tax increase. He's going to dress it up and call it a bottle deposit, doubling the bottle deposit, but it's not a deposit when I don't get the money back. And the idea that I'm going to let Governor Culver and the Democrats keep 2 or 3 cents and spend it on other things, that's a tax increase. And that's a tax increase, frankly, on middle-class families. Everybody goes to their grocery store to think about that the next time they go and say, I wonder how much more out of my wallet Chet Culver and the Democrats want to take, because we're talking about people's grocery bills. So it's a non-starter with me, but, you know, look, Governor Culver was very successful last year getting Democrats to go along with his tax increase idea, so maybe he'll be successful this year, too.
Are you supportive, any of you, of expanding it to include like juice bottles, water bottles, tea, if the deposit weren't doubled?
I personally am not, okay? I grew up working in a grocery store. I worked in the redemption center at times. I got the bottles and cans that came back with things that, well, you won't print in your newspaper what was in some of those bottles and cans. We are turning, unfortunately, I think, sometimes our grocery stores into recycling centers. Bringing your garbage back to the place that you buy your fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that.